Hello, welcome to Exotic Gardening with me, Yorkshire Kris, and in this week's episode we're going to go through my 2024 overwintering guide to make it really easy to get all my plants through winter with minimal effort and hopefully maximum reward. So we're starting off, as we normally do, in the back garden, and we're going to walk around the garden, point out some plants that might need some overwintering help, and also point out the plants which will be totally fine throughout winter without any help whatsoever. So, palm trees to begin with. We've got this beautiful Trachycarpus princeps. These are hardy at least down to -10. No protection needed whatsoever. They'll be left out to all the elements. Here, the wonderful Dahlias in full bloom still. These, a lot of people do lift, but what I like to do is let the frost blacken the foliage down to the ground and then just completely leave them in the ground. I will let the dead foliage sort of cover the crown of the plant, and that is it. That's all I'll do over winter, and they'll come back next year just fine. That's been the same for the last 10-15 years. That's the same for the Cannas behind. So we've got the Canna musifolia. It's a pretty tough one. This has massive rhizomes under the ground, and this one will be left to go back down to the ground. The dead foliage will protect the crown of the plant slightly, but it's pretty hardy, down to -5, -10 with no issue. If you're in a colder area, you might want to put some straw or earth up, some soil or compost over that. What else we've got? We've got the blue bamboos. Now, blue bamboos, this is 1046, is very hardy. It doesn't need any protection. You might get the foliage looking quite ropey after winter, but come spring and in early summer, you get a beautiful flush of new leaves, as you can see here, nice and green. That'll be unprotected over winter. Now, as we walk down the garden, we've got a mixture of plants that are tender and hardy. So we've got here the gingers, like the cannas, like the dahlias. These are left in the ground all winter. This is ginger Hedychium forrestii. You can see here it's actually about to start flowering. Beautiful white flowers sort of into late August all the way through September and into October. But come the first frost, the foliage will die down, but it's extremely hardy. Lower than -10 isn't an issue for this particular ginger. Other gingers are tenderer and may need some protection, but I'm growing the very hardy ginger, which I think is fantastic for its foliage and its flowers. Now, tree ferns. We've got a couple of nice tree ferns in this part of the garden. They're relatively sheltered, long fronds, leaves here, and the only thing I need to do with this in winter, come sort of November time into December, we'll get me a handful of straw. And what we do, where the leaves come out of the top of the trunk, we just get that bunch of straw, put it into the crown, and that is it. That's all I'll do. It's literally a 2-minute job to go around and put the straw in the center of the tree ferns. Obviously, if you live in a colder area, or if we get a really, really cold winter, we might need to do more protection. But generally, and what I expect to happen this winter, is just that straw will protect it down to -5 with no issues. Getting down to -8 and lower is where it starts getting a bit more sketchy, but down to -5, no issues whatsoever. Other plants we've got persicarias down here, these wonderful pinky purple flowers, totally hardy herbaceous plants. Clerodendron here, with the purplish green leaves here. Totally hardy, down to -20, no issues whatsoever. And then if we just scan up, we've got the bamboo hedge, we've got the fatsias just below that. All these totally hardy plants give a really good backbone to this part of the garden. Now, we'll go through the garden, past all the gingers. In fact, we've got one in flower. Let's just have a moment to look at that. We're talking about forrestii flowers. You can see this one has already started flowering. It has a spicy lemony scent, quite delicate, but really, really nice. Over here, we've got lots of flowers, including this wonderful spider flower, Cleome. And to protect this over winter, I do nothing. because it grows from seed every year. It makes this large plant with these nice, interesting leaves. And as you can see, we've actually got caterpillars on these. We've got two. We've got the large white caterpillars and we've got the small white caterpillars. This is not a brassica, but it is a plant that the cabbage white butterflies seem to like and will use as a host plant. But back to overwintering. I might collect the seeds from this, or I might buy seeds next year, but this doesn't need any overwintering whatsoever. And if we scan across in this area, we've got more dahlias that stay in the ground. We have got the large dahlia here, the tree dahlia. It's got no flowers on, it's got those large leaves which get taller and taller throughout autumn into winter. Again, that just stays in the ground, no issues whatsoever. We've got this amaranthus. Again, I might collect seeds from this. This is just an annual for summer colour, so no protection needed. Here is one plant that I do take some cuttings of. This is iricine. It is tender. It will go down to about 5 degrees, plus 5 degrees. It can get down to a touch of frost without too much damage, but you need to take your cuttings before it gets frosty. So I'll take some stem cuttings, jar of water on the windowsill. It'll stay like that for a few weeks over winter, and I'll pot them up as little plants on the windowsill. That is the most effort that I need to do for any plants in the garden. Here we've got Amesia zygomeris with its wonderful leaves, and it's got these purple appendages around the side. This plant is it's towering over me now. I'm nearly 2 meters tall, and this is much taller than me. This will just die down to the ground in winter, and then its herbaceous will just come up in spring with no help at all. It'll just get back and keep growing next year. And this will be fine down to, again, -8 without any protection. If it's a sustained cold period or gets really cold, I would put some straw over the crown of that plant. But it's a nice plant that comes back year after year in the garden. If we go around the corner, a surprising returning plant for me has been this tobacco plant, this green tobacco plant. It will die down with the frost, but it will self-seed, and also it can come back from the roots. So last year, this came back, all of them came back from the roots. So that's a surprise. That was only down to about -5, -6 last winter, but that came back fine. So I won't do anything with that plant. Up here, again, taller than me, we have Cannas alisteinii. Huge canna that can grow to 3 meters tall, flowers well every year. This self-seeds, so we've got some seed pods. Let me just pull this over. These seed pods are fattening up now, and these will produce lots of viable seeds that I can collect. But the actual plants themselves just die back in winter, come back year after year. It's a really, really good canna for the garden. Back over here, we've got zinnias. Beautiful red flowers here. These are from seed, extremely easy from seed. And again, I'll do nothing with these plants because they'll just die back and we will grow more seeds next year. If we go around the corner, these spotted leaves here. This is Xanthodecia Hercules, which has large flowers in May and June and July. And at this time of year, you've just got the foliage. It gets much bigger than this. This is just a small division. Very hardy, will survive down to -10 with no issues at all. Now, one plant that's pretty sort of on the edge of tenderness in my garden is this huge Triflera macrophylla, which will have leaf damage under -5 or below. Above that in milder winters, totally fine. And the only thing I'll do with this is, if you see the main stem, I will wrap fleece around the stem if I see in the weather forecast we're going to get a prolonged cold period. So that is one plant that I may protect if it gets especially cold. But last year, it got no protection whatsoever. Further down the garden, another wonderful plant is Dahlia, extremely hardy, below -15 with no issues. It's deciduous, drops its leaves, and comes back year after year. Above that, we've got the huge Gunnera cryptica. You can see it's towering over me. And this is reliably hardy in my garden. It's a hybrid of Manicata and Tinctoria. So -10, -15 isn't an issue when it's a big established plant like this. The only thing I need to do for this is when the frosts come, bend over the leaves and just put it over the crown of the plant. So again, a 5-minute job at absolute most. Grasses, so we're moving through now. We've got the zebra grass here. This will just brown off over autumn into winter. I will cut it back to ground level and it will flush new foliage in spring. And that's the same for the Miscanthus giganteus grasses, which are all around here. Big, tall grasses, well over 3 meters tall when they flower. And these very, very hardy, down to -15 with no issues whatsoever. So now we're going to step through onto the bridge. We'll walk further down the garden. And we've got the main plant in front of me here. This is the huge Drabea chilensis palm tree. And at this size, even if I wanted to protect it, I couldn't really, because it is absolutely enormous now. And this is hardy to -10, -15 without too much damage. If it's a smaller plant, you might want to protect it. In the worst case scenario, I would put fleece around the centre if I knew we were going to get like a 20, 10, 11 winter where it's sub-zero for 2 weeks, -10 everywhere to -15 in some parts of the country. If we're going to get one of those winters, I would try to protect it, but I'm not going to protect it this winter. Now we'll step this way, past more annuals, past more amaranthus, this tall purple amaranthus here. As you can see, lots of flowers, millions of seeds produced which self-seed, and I do nothing with this plant apart from dig up the dead foliage in winter and it will self-seed around the garden. So a great plant for summer and autumn colour without needing to do absolutely anything to this plant whatsoever. Down here, another Xanthodecia, again, totally hardy, will come back year after year. Nephophias, nice and hardy. This is Northii, which flowers earlier in the season. Again, nice and hardy in my garden. Now we come round to some palm trees. Here we've got a low, sprawling Chimerops cerifera with many heads growing in many directions. And what I find is, in bad winters, the heads that are sort of growing upwards might suffer some damage, but the ones that are growing sideways won't suffer any damage. And this palm tree I won't protect. It's fine, -8, -10 is no problem for this palm tree once it's established in the ground. This blue spiky number is Yucca lineafolia or linearis, and this needs no protection in my garden. It's seen -8 and look at it, it's looking pristine. It's growing really well, and it's actually grown pretty fast over the last 5 or 6 years from a very small plant to this quite large plant in this part of the garden. So no protection for that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to step into the middle and you're going to watch as I point out a few spiky plants here. So down here we have got a agave montana, which is one of the hardiest agaves you can grow. Beyond it, it's hard to see, is a hybrid of Lophanthera, which is not always seen in gardens. It's agave Lophanthera. And we've got agave americana behind it and another agave. So because these are so close together and Lophanthera and americana are not super hardy, this part of the garden does have a rain shelter over it in winter. So come sort of November time, I will get a piece of plastic and some wooden posts and put a shelter over these agaves. Montanas will probably get through without any protection, but because the americana is so close, I will put a shelter, and that will take me about 15-20 minutes to cover this area with a shelter, and it'll stay there to about April time. We've also got this beautiful blue palm here. This is the Mexican fan palm, This is Briar and Marta, steely blue leaves. This is not super hardy, but now I've had it for 10-15 years, been growing well in this spot for 8-9 years now. It comes back and it doesn't get any damage on the spears or the new leaves. The oldest leaves will slowly die off, but this has no protection apart from when it gets very cold. I might put some fleece around the crown of the plant just before it's expected to snow, because I don't want snow to stay in the crown for ages. Because if it snows, it normally means we're going to have minus temperatures for several nights after that, and I don't want the ice to form in there. So I will put fleece around the crown just before snowfall. If it's -5 and it's just frosty days, it'll get no protection whatsoever. We're going to head further down the garden. So I'm going to step through. And before we go further, we're going to lower down. We're going to look here. Look at all these. These are colocasias. These are colocasia pink china with these pinkish purplish stems or petioles on the back of the leaves. These grow nice green heart-shaped leaves every year, and they spread out everywhere as well. So we've got a nice clump here, and we've had many other clumps we've walked past earlier in the video. And these are hardy, so these will stay in the ground, do absolutely nothing with these, and they will just come back. I might put a fleece over some of this area or some straw if I wish to keep one area really protected, but I found they've come back from -8 completely unprotected. And because you have lots of stems coming out of the ground, so here we've got a clump, there's 3 just there, but there's many more in this area. You might get 1 or 2 that rot off in spring, but there's always more that have survived. So you might lose, a quarter of them over winter, but then they'll reproduce rapidly over spring and you'll get a bigger clump year after year. Now I'm going to fight through the foliage here. We've got more Cannas, so these again stay out all winter. We've got a big Bootia palm tree over here, which is now well over 2.5-3 meters tall. This is hardy. This has had no protection for many years now, and it just gets bigger and better every year. -8 with no protection. If again we get much colder, I might put fleece around the centre, but I'm not expecting to do anything this winter. And that's the same for all the palm trees down this part of the garden. So we've got lots of princeps and princeps hybrid palms down here. They need no protection. And we're going to walk around past some bamboos, again totally hardy. So this is Phylostachys atrovirgata, and this is totally fine in the ground. So as we come around the corner, we see more plants, but they don't need protection. We've got the foxglove tree here, totally hardy. I don't do anything with this, and this will get bigger and bigger every year. We've got more of the tree ferns here, quite a lot, and because they're protected by the trees above them, they need no protection whatsoever, and they'll get back and come back stronger year after year. Now we'll come down to this end part of the garden, and what we'll do, we'll just look up because we've got some big trees above us. We've got the eucalyptus, this beautiful silvery white trunk of this Eucalyptus Pauciflora debouvilii, and this is totally hardy in my location, -10, -15 with no damage whatsoever, and it would be impossible to protect this because it's absolutely enormous now. There's no way you can protect this, and that goes for the Gunnii over here and the Regnans in the corner, which could be the tallest flowering tree in the world given time. More bamboos. Again, we don't protect these, but there are some plants further down here which will need some help to get through. We've got bedding plants down here, and one plant which is quite surprisingly hardy is this. This is Trachycarpus Maiden's Blush, and this, believe it or not, is a returning plant. So the frost will kill off all this tropical looking foliage, but it comes back from the roots year after year. So this plant will just be left in the ground, a bit of compost over the crown, and it will come back next year totally fine. Now, what else have we got? We've got my Trachycarpus Oreophyllus, and it's not super nailed on hardy everywhere, but I found it to be hardy. I mean, have it for 12 years now, I believe, and the foliage doesn't like temperatures below -6, -7, so you can get some tired foliage after winter, but it's never spear pulled or anything like that, and I've never needed to really protect it other than put fleece around the crown when it was a lot smaller. So this plant will be left out all winter without protection. Now we come back down the arid path down here. We've got more palm trees. So here we've got a volcano. Again, been very hardy for me, and it's never had protection whatsoever. I won't be protecting it this year. And if we look right down at ground level, we've got a surprising plant to some, a cacti. So this is one of the South American cacti, and this wasn't even protected last winter, and it is strong in the ground. It's slow growing, but it will get through your winter. You can put a little rain shelter over it if you wish. Here we have an Hedychium, and again, it's hard to protect this. I won't protect it, and if it gets through this winter, it will flower next spring and then set seed throughout the garden, and that's how this plant carries on really. It self-seeds every 2 to 3 years, and you get new plants coming, and the old plants will then obviously die off. Desilarion, this spiky plant over here, no protection needed, and it's got these unusual twisted serrated leaves, a bit like a yucca, and that is hardy in my location. -10 isn't an issue for this particular one, as long as it's not too long at that temperature. No rain shelter required. Another Chimerops, which is getting pretty tall now, no protection needed for that one. And here we've got some flowers. We've got Phygelius, which doesn't need any protection. We've got the Salvias. This is basically, it's not Salvia hot lips, but it's very similar, and that is hardy in my location. A nice Agapanthus, a purple flowering Agapanthus, and this one is fine. This is one of the deciduous types, so they're fine and hardy. Another clump of Colocasia down here. So again, this was not protected over winter, and look at it now, it's come back really well. And on the other side of the path, in full bloom now, these wonderful Eucomis polaventii, with these tall spires of creamy white flowers. No protection required for there. So we've pretty much come to the end of looking around the garden, and hopefully what you can see from this video is most of the plants in my garden, although I've made this exotic garden, don't need much winter protection. I leave most things in the ground, and it's really only the Irisine and the Coleus that I'll take cuttings for to keep over winter, and everything else stays out with just the rain shelter over some of the arid plants. And I think that's a really good way to look at growing an exotic garden if you don't want to put too much effort and time into overwintering plants. It's growing plants that will get through winters where you live, because we all live in different areas. We all have different temperatures. If you live by the coast, you'll be able to grow a wider range of exotic plants. If you live up a mountain, you'll still be able to grow exotic plants, but the range will be reduced. And by growing plants that are on the edge, that don't need too much protection, you'll be able to have a wonderful exotic garden without having to overwinter too much inside or spend too much time protecting plants in the ground. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you want some particular guides on overwintering different plants, then check the corner, click that link, and you'll get to my overwintering strategy guides for a wide range of plants. And you may have noticed in my walkthrough here, we've had no bananas. So if you want to see how I've overwintered bananas and grown bananas this year, then check out the link below and we'll go round and look at my bananas. Thank you for watching.